Hello, welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB, and it's another goofball day here in the arena. Yeah, I'm goofed it up again, friends. I didn't record my audio, so I got a trick for Halloween instead of a treat. But here we go. I'm going to re-record that audio so that you still get your episode here today. I may have to miss an episode. We'll see. It depends on the time. Anyway, we start out by talking about how we still have that sponsorship and all those packs in the account that we can't open. We just kind of look around at those, and we look around for something to play with our quest. And eventually we come back to a green-white deck. This is interesting. It's been 2 days since I recorded this. This is going to be unique. To see if I can remember how these games even go or what the hell I'm even doing. But we start on a build, and I want to bring green-white tokens back. I talk a little bit how I want my threats to be sticky, and I always want a few removal spells available. So I throw some Sealaways in and Martyr of Dusk since it makes a dude when it dies. I look at some of the other cards, rare cards like Bounty Agent, and I say that I really want my creatures to either be hard to remove, leave tokens, make tokens, or stick to the theme. So I'm not just looking for any rare card or any good rate. I'm looking for cards that will specifically help the token theme. And after talking about that for a hot minute, we go find History of Benalia, which we just opened a second one, and it is a powerful card. If you can craft them, or you like playing white decks, you probably should craft them. It's among the best out there. We continue our deck salad with Make a Stand. It was so good for us last time that we played green-white tokens. Why not? Let's do it. Militia Bugler is a nice thought, as it can grab some of the cards like Martyr of Dusk. Johnny's just super powerful. Leonin Warleader makes tokens and is a powerful threat on its own, which is something we like. Shalai, Voice of Plenty, +1/+1 counters on each creature we control. So that gets added to the deck. I always like having access, or at least the idea of having access to a Settle the Wreckage to surprise our opponents. I talk about Confront the Assault, but 5 mana being too much for 3 1/1s. However, a Venerated Loxodon gets into the deck, and Inspiring Commander also goes onto the bench, and we'll see. We're still going to trim this back quite a bit. So this is the phase where when I build a deck, I throw in everything I might want, and then I refine it a little bit later. I talk about how many creatures I actually have that would pump a Pelt Collector, and I'm really not sure. So let's take Pelt Collector and let's add it to the deck. I'm going to try to start talking in the past and start talking in the present. Might of the Masses can be another payoff for tokens deck, so we add that. Then Merfolk Branchwalker, which we just crafted, is a good value card to help us hit our land drops and curve out. I said I wanted my 2 drops to be token themed, but sometimes you can't argue with one of the most played creatures in the game right now, Merfolk Branchwalker. Saproling Migration for sure, Thorn Lieutenant for sure, of course. The District Guide is possibly good, and being able to get a land and get a body, so kind of 2 cards in one to help you make sure that you hit your land drops and play your spells on time, can be a big deal. Looking at some of these other cards, they're not a bunch that are token themed, but it's hard to... We could run Pause for Reflection and Convoke it and fog the opponent, or Pax Favor for a trick, but I don't think either of those are very good. Sprouting Renewal does make a token or destroys an artifact or enchantment, and Jade Light Ranger is mega value. If we're going to run Branchy, Jade Light can't be too far behind. Sap Herd gets added, Path of Discovery, and Spore Swarm. Now that's the kind of token thing we like, along with Tendershoot Dryad. Get that Saproling synergy into the deck. And what comes up after that? Amara, the Soul of the Accord, is definitely a token card. I don't know if the Ladev Champion is. I've never actually gotten to do much with it, but 5 mana for a 1/1 doesn't seem great. We'll throw it in the deck now and see if it makes the cut. Conclave Cavalier is definitely going in. The Wood Shaper looks like a fun card. I just wish it were 1 mana less. At the current rate, I don't think that you can justify paying 4 mana for a tiny body, just a 2/1, that looks at your top 4. It might miss, and then you paid 4 mana for a 2/1. It's pretty ugly. But Camaraderie and March of the Multitudes. Those are the big cards we want, along with that recently crafted Immortal Sun. Oh yeah. Now we talk about the Nambo here. The Ajani Adversary of Tyrants can't be activated when we have Immortal Sun on the battlefield, as it turns off all Planeswalker abilities on both sides. So that's something to keep in mind whether or not we want Ajani to make the deck. I like to get about 8 dual lands into the deck, and those 8 dual lands will help me cast my critters on time, or spells, all the spells. I probably could have added a Memorial to Glory and simply did not see it. I've become so used to not having the memorials that I think I glazed right over it. Going back up the list, we're at 74 cards, plenty to cut. Thinking about, do we want all these 4-drops? Yes, we do, but probably not Settle the Wreckage, as we're just going to try to curve out and stomp the opponent. Jadelight Ranger is a debatable one, but Sprouting Renewal doesn't make it far, and neither does the Bugler when we see that we don't have that many small power creatures. We're much more leaning on War Leader, Shalai, things of that nature. Whether or not to make tokens, whether or not to get value, the debate rages on, but one thing's for sure, Ladev Champion can go. Jadelight Ranger finally gets cut from the deck. Then we look around and see, well, not a lot of ways to pump certain cards. The Pelt Collector, for example, just not a lot of ways to pump it up. Might of the Masses we don't need. We have Camaraderie, we have the Immortal Sun, we have Shalai, we have other ways. Other ways to go over the top. We don't have a Tristani, which is a pretty sweet card, but maybe at some point we'll be able to get our hands on one of those. A Venerated Loxodon is also a great payoff. After quite some debate, the Pelt Collector and the Martyrs both hit the block. They're both on the bench. And with one card to go, after quite a bit of tearing my hair out, I come around to saying that, well, Ajani, what are you actually pumping? What are you actually getting back? Probably not much compared to the power of the Immortal Sun and the other 4-drops. Like, for the cost of Ajani, I think I just want to play a Leonin War Leader or a Spore Swarm and smash the opponent's face. So as much as I like the Ajani, in this case it has to go. Maybe in a future deck, Ajani will make it to the end. And somebody else has to run this yard. Somebody else has to get up there in the art box. The Martyr's not here anymore. So swipe that out. And into the first game we go. Happy Halloween, everybody. I am recording this on Halloween. I hope wherever you are out there that you have a very wonderful Halloween. I would say, like, stay safe, but I trust you all. You're all smart, capable people. Don't eat too much candy. Don't be sick tomorrow. Like, some people, that's part of their routine is to get sick. I don't get that. Eat a reasonable amount, and then eat a reasonable amount for probably the next 2 weeks. How about that? You still have to perform at your best, whether it's at school, at sports, at work, whatever you have to do in life, you have to be able to perform. That's a big part of my quitting soda is don't damage your feet. I'm trying to be a better performer, both in Magic and in life. So we lead on the Branchwalker. I want to make sure that my draw is nice and smooth. My opponent shows an Opt. Branchwalker can also potentially attack for more than the Migration. And we decide to keep that on top. It makes more tokens. More tokens are good. We have March of the Multitudes and Camaraderie. So it's all about getting there. And we find out if our opponent has a removal spell. Well, not yet they don't. Oftentimes, if you're playing against a green and white deck, you may want to use your removal spells on your own turn. It always depends on your hand, whether or not you have a counterspell or something to hold up. But letting the opponent get to use Convoke in this format by untapping with their creature can be a bit of a misstep. The 1/1s are here. Got a few Saprolings on the table after Shock takes out the Branchwalker. Here is Search for Azcanta. A very good card that we also play in our blue-black deck, but a little bit slow. It has to fill the graveyard and get to 7 cards in the graveyard to flip into the Sunken Ruin. And then, when it does flip, you have to pay 4 mana to search for a card that is a non-creature, non-land, and put it into your hand. And then you get to cast that card. So, very powerful effect, but very slow. So, our plan becomes, let's beat this opponent as quickly as we can before this whole Iskanta thing comes into play. And let's play something right now when we don't think our opponent will counter it. Having 2 mana open means they would have to have a very specific counter spell. Disdainful Stroke, Syncopate, and Negate all do it, but if they have Essence Scatter or Sinister Sabotage, that would not work. So we take the window, we play Path to Discovery to try to make all our creatures huge, and to help us explore and hit land drops so that we can play Camaraderie and a huge March of the Multitudes. Next up off the top, History of Benalia after our opponent plays the Gutter Snipe. Gutter Snipe sitting on the table, threatening to shock us with 2 damage every time a spell gets cast. Because our opponent didn't counter our Path to Discovery with 2 mana last turn, we main phase our Spore Swarm. We want to get our Path to Discovery triggers. And here's an interesting choice. Do we keep another Spore Swarm or do we graveyard it? I'm thinking about it quite a bit on this one, but I decide 3 more dudes and 3 more Explore triggers eventually is probably the right way to go. We could also dig deeper and try to get to the Second Sun or just other land drops. Eventually I decide I want to make absolutely sure that I play Camaraderie on time, and then I make a little kerfluffle. A little boo-boo, my friends. We hit the punt meter. You see, I think that March of the Multitudes costs 2 green and 1 white, because I don't play with the card enough. I should know this by now, and I should just look back and read the card. I play the untapped white source because I think it will let me do March of the Multitudes. It will not. I need another white creature or 2 white sources. So I should have played my Temple Garden tapped. That way I wouldn't have to pay 2 life on a future turn if I wanted to use it. Oopsie daisy. You have my apologies for subpar play. I'll try to make it up to you with absolutely ridiculous things. So here comes a Thorn Lieutenant off the top, and now our hand has so many options. We could Camaraderie right now, gain 5 life, and draw 5 cards if it resolved. Our opponent left all their mana open. So this is a turn where I'm concerned about a counterspell quite a bit, and I want to try to get my opponent to play the counterspell. So I try to pick the spell that the opponent is most likely to counter, and the spell I most want. The spell I most want is History of Benalia. The spell I think is most likely to get countered if I play it before History is Thorn Lieutenant. And there's an Ionize, taking the Lieutenant down. So the counter played as suspected. It does deal 2 to us from Gutter Snipe, 2 to us from Ionize. Down comes History of Benalia, and the Knights get to start the party. The Explorer trigger goes off. I don't need a District Guide at this point, so we bin it. And now I have to pay the 2 life for the Temple Garden to make March of the Multitudes available. I go for casting it right now to play around another counterspell from the opponent, an Ionize or a Sinister Sabotage if they should have one. They haven't had a way to counter it for 2 mana the entire game, so it's a pretty easy choice here. Path to Discovery. We make 4 dorks. We get 2 lands off the path. We get a Llanowar Elf to put in the graveyard and make a 2/2, and we get a Tender Shoot that we definitely want to keep on top of our deck, as it's a wonderful card at this phase of the game. Our opponent puts a land into the graveyard with Search for Iskanta. They still can't activate it quite yet. Let's see if they can draw something to get them back in the game. The best things, possibly a Star of Extinction and a Fiery Cannonade, are some ways that the opponent could kill all of our creatures and restart the party. We still have a Saproling Migration to rebuild, as well as another chapter on History of Benalia and a Tender Shoot on top. So we're in a good position, I think, no matter what. And I'm already dreaming of what it will be like to gain X life and draw X cards, where X is the number of creatures I control. Currently 11. Gain 11 life, draw 11 cards. Give all 11 of my creatures +1/+1 until end of turn. It sounds like a beautiful fantasy. Could it come true? Our opponent will opt. They'll shock me with the Gutter Snipe, but we're still at 12. It would be a very long trip for our opponent to get us to 0 from here. and we have lifelink soldiers that are ready to attack. A little bit of the rope as we wonder what on earth our opponent could be trying to do, and they elect to Banefire us for 5 and show us, I suppose, how the end game would go, trying to race us as much as they possibly can. Perhaps drawing another Banefire is their strategy. We're looking at a Mentor of the Meek. It doesn't really matter at this point whether I keep it or bin it, but I talk about it briefly, as usual. And shall we camaraderie with our opponent tapped out? We do a little bit of math, just adding up for sure. Does this kill our opponent? As maybe the Tendershoot Dryad would have done more damage since it's +2/+2 to Saprolings and +0/+0 to other tribes. But after doing the math, the camaraderie is certainly lethal, and we get to enjoy the pleasure of drawing a silly amount of cards and attacking for a silly amount of damage. Our opponent at 18 can block the 4/4 and still go into negative territory. And there you go. First game in the bag. Twas a glorious battle. So without further ado, we'll get another game in. I'll take a minute to have some water myself. I do enjoy commentating over my own videos somewhat. There's a reduced pressure because I already know the outcomes and I don't have to worry about saying the right thing and misplaying at the same time. On the other hand, it's really awkward to try to watch yourself and be like, oh my God, what was I thinking? What was going through my mind when I did this, when I said that? Anybody might want to try it, perhaps once, see what it's like. Anyway, the hand is great. A Selesnya Guildgate, a Forest, a Plains, a Leonin War Leader, Saproling Migration, and Yavimaya Sapherd, Immortal Sun. I can already smell victory. I'm pretty excited about the hand. Path to Discovery right off the top, and there is a Merfolk Branchwalker. So our opponent on the play hitting the branchies, and we're going to answer them with a Saproling Migration, make 2 1/1 Saproling tokens. However, I don't really want to block the Merfolk Branchwalker with those. Someday in the future, those Saprolings will grow up and they'll be much bigger thanks to the Immortal Sun or thanks to some other pump spell. So trading away your tokens is usually a pretty bad thing to do when you're running the token deck. Of course, we don't want to get beaten to death, and we have to be mindful that our opponent plays a card like Status and Statue, which could just blow up a double block anyway. Here our opponent makes an aggressive play. They use the Vicious Offering to destroy one of the tokens. You could have, if you're the opponent, I think you would like to save that Vicious Offering until after blocks are made or not made. Because if the opponent double blocked, you could blow up one of the tokens and kill both of them. But the opponent, I mean, what that play tells you is they're prioritizing damage and they think that they can beat me quickly. So the Sapherd is going to block. We're looking at the tricks my opponent could have. They could have another Status to Statue, but I really don't mind. If they spend this turn playing a trick, they missed a land drop, and if they have to spend their mana making sure that their Branchwalker doesn't die, I'm okay with that. And in this case, they have a Fungal Infection to make a 1/1 and give -1/-1 to the Sapherd. We go right to our Path of Discovery. Consider an attack, but decide we still want to keep our creatures around a bit longer because the Immortal Sun will eventually make them stronger. As long as we're not about to die, trading them away is not what we want to do. Another Branchwalker. Our opponent's still looking for their third land, and they see a Vicious Offering. They decide to keep it. I really don't like that choice either. If I were in the opponent's shoes, I would want to bin that. Looking at these 1/1s, I think that you need to draw lands. I think that what's probably the best way into the game is to get enough lands to play more powerful things, especially in the face of a Path of Discovery. In this case, Path of Discovery immediately reveals a Venerated Loxodon, which can pump up our tokens into larger creatures, and I decide to keep it. as it can make some really big saprolings. It's an excellent payoff for the Convoke decks and well worth crafting. Llanowar Elves, I suppose our opponents had that for a turn or two. They didn't draw it last turn. And they tried a Branchwalker instead, but perhaps they're not as worried about mana as we thought. I don't know. I'd be worried about mana on 2 land. So now we say, let's play History of Benalia. History of Benalia will do the Explorer thing. We debate a Branchwalker and decide the graveyard is better, try to draw more high impact spells and lands. And then, using the History of Benalia token for the white mana source, we can play a Venerated Loxodon, pumping the Benalish Knight and the other 4 saprolings that we tapped. Once again, we bin the Mentor, the Meek, just looking for only the highest, the greatest and bestest threats that we can find at this stage, as the beating we are going to apply is getting stronger and stronger. As well as lands. If we find more lands off our path to discovery, the Immortal Sun can come out soon. I don't know that we'll need it, but it's good to be available. Our opponent with a Vicious Offering, they can certainly pick on the Loxodon. They could even attack if they wanted to, although I think that's inviting disaster. And it's a Jade Light Ranger. So they explore, they see another land, they see a Branchwalker, they do keep it on top. Definitely in a spot like this, I'm not sure exactly what gets you back into the game from the opponent's spot as they're falling further and further behind, but I would explore aggressively for whatever that card is. I'm not saying they run Golden Demise or anything, but perhaps they run a Vraska or a Vivian Reed to blow up the Path of Discovery, just something to at least solve some of the problems they are facing. That's what I would look for. I don't think Merfolk Branchwalker does it, and now we start turning the beasts sideways. And whatever shall happen here right now. Our opponent is going to block 2 of the 3/3s with the Branchwalker and debate blocking in other places, decide against it, take a silly amount of damage, going all the way down to 4, and we'll play Shalai, the Voice of Plenty. We know our opponent has a Vicious Offering that could kill it, but if we play the Shalai, our opponent can't kill our other things. So it does force them into whatever they were cooking up. They probably have to use Vicious Offering on Shalai, the Voice of Plenty, this turn, and still have the mana to do something else. It's very unlikely. They're most likely dead. Find Finality. The Finality side of Find is still a bit off and would not kill the Loxodon. Yeah, I can't really think of a way out. Our opponent does try to think their way out of the trap for a few minutes, but I'm confident at this point that they will not get there. Our opponent's probably also on some form of a green-black budget Explorer deck, similar to the one that we're playing, probably missing the Planeswalkers still and trying to play towards the decks that are tearing up the meta right now, but it's really hard to do without the Planeswalkers, as we've already shown a few times on the channel. There's Vicious Offering, down goes the Angel, 1 dead Angel. And our quest is to play green and white spells. Let's see if I actually remember that and play green and white spells. Cast Down will kill a knight. Our opponent's trying to find a way to survive 1 turn more, but the Immortal Sun will slam that door pretty hard if we play it. It is not a green and white spell, though. I should have played other things. And opponent will scoop before the attack comes, knowing that the end is indeed here. Alright, still a few spells to go on that quest, only 3. Let's go get them. The green-white decks are pretty fun. I don't think they're pretty budget. You're going to want a lot more Venerated Loxodons, History of Benalias, and March of the Multitudes to have a full deck. And I think you're going to need 3 ofs, or especially for History, 4 ofs along the way. That's a lot. That's a lot of wild cards to get to the upgraded system. That's one of the reasons I like control decks. I mean, they usually, the full-on control decks have a lot of mythics and rares, but you can also, you don't have to play 4 of everything in control deck to make it work. Sometimes there's a spell like Vraska's Contempt in the last format that you just have to have 4 of, but in the current format you can have a lot of 1s and 2s, much like our Dimir deck does right now, and it's still very functional. Most aggressive decks and decks that work off synergies don't work that way. You do have to have 3 ofs and 4 ofs of the cards that really make the deck tick, or your draws are just so much significantly worse than they could be. So I'm looking at the hand and I'm already thinking of the glory of War Leaders turning sideways and smashing face. If this is the game I think it is, it's going to be a very hard one for me to watch again. Can't bear to watch. No. This is the hard part of commentary. This is the hard part. I know it is. So we open up with the Guild Gate. We have nothing to play on 1. And I start talking about how we haven't drawn a Llanowar Elf in our opening hand yet, and how a Llanowar Elf for this hand would be so amazing. Because we could play early War Leaders on the play, and that's going to be hard for anybody to deal with. Our opponent opens with the Steam Vents, and here comes the Llanowar Elf right off the top. So I'm already having dreams and visions of getting to play this Leonin War Leader and how great it's going to be. Our opponent, open mana, pass. We draw Path of Discovery. This is the key point in the game. 2 open mana. Could be an Essence Scatter, could be a Negate, could be a Syncopate, could be a lot of things. Could be a Lightning Strike. I'm debating the Path of Discovery for more value, or the Leonin War Leader for more beatdown, because it's so hard to answer if I play early. I specifically talk about Essence Scatter. I know I do. And I say that Path of Discovery would be the better play if our opponent has Essence Scatter. I go for the aggressive play, and it's even harder to watch a second time. It's even harder to watch a second time, my friends. It's worse knowing what comes next. So I'm sitting here looking at my hand saying, well, that sucked and that might have been a mistake, but I'm probably fine. I've got all these cards. It's going to be okay. We're going to play another Leonin War Leader and it's going to run this player over. Everything's going to be great. And that's what we do when our opponent taps out for Enigma Drake. Well. Lava Coil. 4 damage. Kill it. Both Leonin War Leaders down in the graveyard without doing a single thing to help me. Showing why, as strong as that card is, it's probably not playable in serious standard, because people that can just kill it for 2 mana, and it's so... when they die and just don't do anything, it just hurts. It's a sad kitty. Sad kitty. Now the Enigma Drake is a 3/4. My opponent has already used their mana and their spells. They play a tap land. I guess they could have done one more thing. And here comes the Enigma Drake. 3 points to my face. So now what do we do? And it's a tough one, because on one hand, they're tapped out. I could go for Path of Discovery in the value game. On the other, I don't think the value game will work. I think Enigma Drake will kill me before Path of Discovery's value can pay off. So with that in mind, I decided to play Merfolk Branchwalker and Imara, the Soul of the Accord. Again, I don't want to play the value game for too long. I want to find more lifelink or my Sealaways, something to deal with the Enigma Drake. And I'm hoping that Imara can make a lifelinker or 2, and the lifelinkers can help keep me alive in the race. At least that's the plan. Of course, the plan is a colossal failure, because this player came prepared with just an amazing 7-card draw to bring the absolute beats. And they're also going to tap nice and careful. They have a Lightning Strike ready for Imara. The Enigma Drake goes to a 4/4. It slaps us upside the head, and now they have 3 mana open, which is... It just screams counterspell, you know what I mean? It's just screaming counterspell over there. So we decide what is the best thing we can do in this situation. And without a removal spell and without life gain, we have to try to race. So after doing some math and figuring out if the opponent just doesn't have any more good spells or anything else that they can do to us, we can race. We can race by attacking with Branch Walker and playing Conclave Cavalier. I definitely debated the race a little bit longer, as you can see. At this point, though, I'm very priced into doing it. I'm just... I'm tilted from the Essence Scatter, Lava Coil, Lightning Strike answer suite that the opponents had so far, and thinking that Cavalier will get countered, but it isn't. The Cavalier resolves, giving me hope, just a little bit of hope that we can race. But then Crackling Drake takes to the battlefield, draws a card, and that is definitely not a good thing to see for our hope of racing. Also, there's a shock to just take out the Branch Walker. And the points from the Enigma Drake means now if the opponent, as long as they refuse to block, they'll win the game. Drawing a Seal Away is the only thing that could have bought us a turn. Since I can only afford 1 spell, I play my green spell, Path of Discovery, and concede the game. I suppose if you want to be absolutely amazing or use Jedi Mind Tricks, we could have tried attacking with the Cavalier to see if the opponent would block when they shouldn't. I just noticed watching this back that all the packs and gems are now gone. You can see that the gem count went down to 0 again, and that the packs are no longer blinking. So somewhere while I was making this video, Wizards fixed the sponsorship snafu that went on for the last few days. Not only that, you don't have to stare at those 30 packs anymore. But I will tell you, they also took one of the packs that we earned. We had 61 packs of Guilds of Ravnica. I wanted 60 transferred, and I did specify that very clearly in the case that I opened, but they transferred all 61. So Wizards stole a pack from young CGB. After giving young CGB 60 packs, they stole one of our hard-earned packs. Shenanigans, my friends, pure shenanigans. So now I look down at a hand. It has Llanowar Elves, it has Spore Swarm, it has Seal Away. It's all for the vengeance. Can we avenge that ugly, ugly beating we just took at the hand of the Drake deck? Opening with the Llanowar Elves, our opponent now shows black and blue. Perhaps I make a joke about leaving them black and blue. Our opponent fires off Thought Erasure. So what card do you take? If I were them, yeah, I think I agree with taking the Migration. It also depends on your hand, although Spore Swarm is a problem. We go for the Guild Gate since we don't have a 2-drop anymore, and it's very unlikely we'll get to seal something away. And here comes Disinformation Campaign, our opponent forcing us to discard. I like to discard conditional removal in this spot because even if we kept the Seal Away, our opponent knows about it because of the Thought Erasure. It revealed our hand to them. They could just play around it, meaning not attack with their big creatures, hold them back until we don't have 2 mana available. So discarding Seal Away makes a lot of sense. It also means they won't play around another Seal Away if we're lucky enough to draw one. Dead Weight comes down. Goodbye, Llanowar Elves. And now we do get to untap. We have March of the Multitudes, and we have our Saprolings. I play an aggressive March of the Multitudes here, just trying to get an awesome board presence, because my hand is pretty ugly, and if my opponent has Ritual Soot or Golden Demise to kill them, they're probably going to win the game. But if they don't have it, we need to beat them quickly before they draw it. Otherwise, we'll almost certainly lose the long game to the Disinformation Campaign and attacking our hand. Also, if we had waited till the next turn, it's possible our opponent might have countered the March of the Multitudes. That's why we played it now. Notion Rain. Notion Rain. Notion Rain. Woo! So our opponent, this is a point I talk about for a bit in the video, and I'll talk about it here. Our opponent used Notion Rain, and they drew 2 cards. They did not surveil. They didn't put any of those cards into the graveyard. So at this point, I am convinced that they kept a Ritual Soot or a Golden Demise, because you would surveil any card that didn't solve this problem. You have to kill these 7 creatures. Your deck isn't set up, if you are the surveil deck, the blue-black deck, to kill these creatures one by one, and it will take too long. You will die before you can kill them all without a sweeper, without an area of effect spell like Ritual of Soot or Golden Demise. So, if my opponent had the opportunity to look at 2 different cards, but chose to keep the cards they saw, they must have one of those cards, right? Friends, if you ever cast a card like Notion Rain, Opt, Thought Erasure, any of these surveil cards, a Merfolk Branchwalker, these cards that let you look at the top card of your deck and decide whether to keep it or bin it, you need to bin cards that don't solve your problems. If the problems you face will kill you. My little army of tokens is a problem that will kill my opponent quickly. Don't keep cards unless they solve that problem. Please. All right. Anyway, our opponent scoops it up. Perhaps they made a mistake and it was a misclick, but it's a good lesson for new players. And now, after saying the usuals, like thank you for watching, we say good night. And I will say the same to you here. Thank you for watching. Happy Halloween. Good night.